Hey everybody, welcome. It's Tracy Brown, and we are here to build some momentum. Woo! Yeah. It happens to be the Martin Luther King Jr. Day holiday, and so it's appropriate that we focus in and use as inspiration today a Martin Luther King Jr. quote. And many of you have heard this quote over and over again throughout the years. In the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. And while I believe that quote needs almost no explanation, I still feel called to talk a little bit about how frustrating it is when the people who say that they are your allies or your friends, the people who say they care about you, don't speak up on your behalf or don't speak when you're not in the room and they are, and they need to hold to a higher standard. So as part of the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group, it's really important for us to all practice um, speaking up and interrupting race-based hatred and violence. And I know it's scary sometimes, um, even for me, and I'm pretty experienced at doing something, always doing something. Um, it's not always easy to decide, is this the time to speak? Is this the time to interrupt that person's behavior? Is this the time to say stop, no, no more? Because there's so many circumstances. But let's assume that you are in a circumstance where you are really clear what is yours to do is to speak. What is yours to do is to step up or to step forward. And you know that, but you're not sure what to say. Clearly, it's challenging because it's not a script. There's no script that you can memorize and then always know the exact perfect thing to say or the exact perfect thing to do. So, what I wanted to do today on momentum is just give you three ideas or three tips to keep in mind when you are trying to formulate what to say or do when you know it is time for you to speak up and to no longer be silent. So, the first one is to focus on yourself in this way, to focus on yourself in what you say. So this works when what you really want to do is criticize the other person, right? Or you want to make them wrong. This is mostly going to be in a situation with a family member or a coworker, someone who you know pretty well, or that you have excuse me, you have ongoing contact with, and you know you've got to speak to the issue. You must challenge what they are doing or what they have said. But you're not really sure that the most effective thing, or sometimes even the most kind thing to do, it would be to um, it would not be that to just slash them verbally. And so those are those situations where it is helpful to be able to share verbally what you believe or what you value. And obviously, it's going to be different from what they are doing or saying or valuing. But instead of starting from that place of you're wrong, you're racist, you are offending me, you are scaring me, you are embarrassing me, which makes it all about them being wrong, and then they have to, you know, have to adhere to your standards. It's actually often more effective to simply say, well, that's really interesting, but what I believe is that everyone is equal, or what I believe is everyone should have equal access to that resource. And it's that doesn't necessarily invite an argument or a debate, right? It's I'm just sharing, I'm actually not in agreement with that. I believe that it's time for our nation to step up and to actually live the values that we say we believe in. Right. So one tip, one strategy is to speak to the issue or the challenge from a place of sharing your beliefs and your values. Number two. Number two also is best used when you are in an interpersonal situation with, either one-on-one or one, you are the one person in a small group. This doesn't work as well. What I'm going to suggest doesn't work as well if you were in a group of 8 or 10 people or more. But it does work when you're with a small group. And, at the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group, our focus is on what can you do or say with the people you come into contact with in the places where you find yourself working, living, um, worshiping. And so in the What Is Mine to Do group, we are very much focused on the interpersonal versus the institutional. So this strategy of knowing it's your time to do something and you want to speak up, you don't want to be silent. It is really powerful to ask this question: how can I help you speak up? How can I support you? Now this really works when you are with another person or with a very small group of people, and someone has said, let's say there was the murder of a black man in the news, and you're talking to someone or you're with a couple of people, and what is said is, oh, that really breaks my heart. It's so unfair that black men keep getting killed. And for you, but you know that this person or the people who are saying this, they really do care, but they would never write a letter to a legislator. They would be unlikely to go be in a march the next day. They are not going to take, or in the past have not taken action. They just express their feelings. So it's really helpful to be able to say, I've heard you, I hear you saying that. Um, how can I help you actually elevate that concern where it counts? What we do often do that is not helpful is we either criticize. Yeah, you say that every time someone gets, murdered, but you never do anything about it. Well, that's not going to be helpful because they're going to be defensive. So instead, to say, how can I help you elevate that to the attention? Or, how can I practice with you? Would you like to practice with me? This is also really, really effective in the workplace. So if you have a coworker and something's happening in the workplace that seems to be a disparity that's race based, certain employees, maybe our bilingual employees, are ignored or are not valued or not recognized in the same way, even though they're going above and beyond, and someone else notices it, and or you and a couple of people are talking about it, and then someone says, well, that's just the way it is. It's really helpful to be able to say, I would be willing to go with you and talk with HR about that. Or what would it take for you to actually have a conversation with the vice president about that? Can I coach you through that? Or can I be your sounding board if you want to practice on me? So that's the technique number two that is really, really effective. And again, with, one on one or with no more than two or three other people at one time. And then the third tip I have for you is related to institutional, but it does fit in with the mind to do approach, because it allows you to question individuals in the context of the organization, or a team of people in the context of the organization. So it works really well in the workplace. It works really well in a church or a spiritual setting, because in both cases, or a professional association or a fraternity or sorority, you're going to use the established mission or the established values in order to ask this question. When someone has done something that is out of alignment with the values and it appears that it's race based, often it'll be race-based hatred or race-based, verbalizations, which in my mind is right verbal violence. It's not usually going to be physical violence, but to ask the question, what you just said, how does that align with our values in this organization, right? Or, wow, I'm really surprised to hear you say that. Can you help me see how that aligns with our mission? And if it is a spiritual organization, you could also use with our principles, right? With the principles that we are, the spiritual principles that we are all studying and committing to together. So in that way, you're using the institutional values or mission that you share in common, and you're asking the question of, help me understand how this is in alignment with what we teach or what we have said is important. And again, this question approach is simply um, a technique to use that slows down the process. It interrupts the race-based hatred and violence. It slows down the process, often without pushing someone to defensiveness, because you're not accusing them. So with that third technique, right, you could easily say, oh, well, Tracy, that doesn't align with the spiritual principle that we teach here. Or, Tracy, I can't believe that you said that, right? It is not in alignment with our vision, our mission, and the values that we've taught. You are a problem, right? But then that person will be defensive and you won't get through to them. Now it may be they get defensive immediately, and then overnight they think about it after they get home and they, calm down. But even then, you know, they're, because they started off defensive, they're likely to avoid you. They're likely to then look for things about you to criticize, because in our human nature, right, in the way that we've been socialized during the 20th and 21st century, people, there are times to be critical. There are. There are times to be direct in that criticism, and you want to select those times carefully so that they have meaning and value. So, the Martin Luther King quote: in the end, we will remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends. So, these are three techniques that you can keep in mind, that you can be trying out and using with people who have said they are friends to the movement to interrupt or end race based hatred and violence. These are not necessarily techniques that you want to use on people who have expressed disdain. They're not the techniques that you want to use necessarily on people who have positioned themselves as quote unquote enemies to equity and fairness and freedom. So, that's a whole nother momentum episode. Today's episode is about the people who have identified themselves as friends to interrupting race-based hatred and violence, or people who have said that they want to be in an environment where there is equality, equity, and freedom. These are three techniques that you might be able to use with them. I invite you to practice those when you get an opportunity, and I'd love to have some feedback if it works for you. And I'd love to have feedback or offer additional coaching if you find that you try one or more of these and they don't work at all for you. And you can always find me over at the What Is Mine to Do Facebook group. So please, please, please join us there. My name is Tracy Brown. This is this week's episode of Momentum, and I will see you again next Monday at 8 p.m. Central Time.